There's a man in Manhattan right now who cannot fall asleep unless his apartment is exactly 68 degrees. Not 67, not 69, 68. He spent $4,000 on a climate system that maintains this temperature to the 10th of a degree, and he still wakes up in a panic if the compressor clicks off for even a second. He has not slept well in 3 years. And the thing that keeps him up at night, the thing that really gnaws at him, is not the money. It is the fact that when he was 22, sleeping on a bare mattress in a studio apartment in Queens with nothing but a box fan and an open window, he slept like a dead man. 8 hours. No dreams. No panic. Just sleep. So what happened? What changed? And more importantly, who benefits from the fact that he can no longer live without a machine regulating the air around his body while he lies unconscious? That is the question nobody is asking. And that is exactly what we are going to tear apart today. Because there is a hidden cost to building a life where nothing goes wrong. A cost that does not show up on your credit card statement or your monthly budget. It shows up in your nervous system. It shows up in the slow, creeping inability to handle anything that is not perfectly controlled. You are not buying comfort. You are buying fragility. And the receipt is your own resilience, traded away one subscription, one upgrade, one premium service at a time. Let me tell you about a woman named Karen. She lives in Austin, Texas. She has not cooked a meal in 4 years. Every breakfast, lunch, and dinner arrives at her door, portioned, labeled, and temperature controlled. She pays roughly $1,400 a month for this. She told a friend of mine, and I quote, "I literally do not know how to feed myself anymore." She laughed when she said it. But there was something behind the laugh, something hollow, because Karen is a 41-year-old woman with a graduate degree and a 6-figure salary, and she has, through the slow accumulation of convenience, lost the ability to perform one of the most basic functions of human survival. She cannot nourish herself, not because she is lazy, not because she is stupid, but because the market found a way to sell her a version of life where she never had to, and she bought it. And now, standing in a grocery store, she feels a genuine wave of anxiety. The choices, the ingredients, the process, it all feels foreign. It feels like a threat. And that feeling, that helplessness in the face of something simple, that is the product. That is what she actually purchased. You think you are buying time when you outsource every friction point in your life. You think you are being efficient, smart, optimized. But what you are really doing is running a kind of experiment on yourself, and the results are devastating. Every skill you stop practicing does not just get rusty. It gets reframed as a burden, something beneath you, something that belongs to a lesser version of your life. And once that reframing takes hold, you are trapped, because now you need the service, not as a luxury, but as a lifeline. And that, my friend, is the most profitable customer a company can ever create, someone who physically cannot walk away. This did not happen by accident. This is not some unfortunate side effect of progress. This was built, engineered, refined over the better part of a century. And to understand how it works, you have to go back to a time when Americans were too tough, too self-reliant, too capable for the emerging consumer economy to function. You have to go back to the problem that kept the captains of industry awake at night. The problem of a population that could do too much for itself. Picture the United States in the early 1930s. The Great Depression has gutted the economy. Factories sit idle. Warehouses are stacked to the ceiling with goods that nobody is buying. And the reason nobody is buying is not just that people are broke, though they certainly are. The deeper reason, the one that scared the industrialists even more than empty wallets, is that ordinary Americans were shockingly self-sufficient. The average household in 1930 could grow a portion of its own food, could mend its own clothes, could fix a broken chair, patch a roof, preserve fruit, butcher a chicken, and build a shelf. These were not extraordinary people. These were just people. This was just what life was. You learned to do things because things needed doing, and there was no one to call and no app to download and no subscription to activate. You either figured it out or you went without, and most people figured it out. Now put yourself in the shoes of a man trying to sell vacuum cleaners to this population, or an automobile, or a washing machine. You are not just competing with other brands. You are competing with the person's own hands, their own knowledge, their own deep, inherited competence. And that competence is the single greatest obstacle to the growth of the consumer economy. This is not my theory. This is documented. The business journals of the 1920s and 30s are filled with hand-wringing about the problem of self-sufficiency. How do you sell a product to someone who does not need it? How do you create a customer out of someone who is already whole? The answer came in stages, and the first stage was perhaps the most brilliant and the most sinister. You do not attack the person's ability. You attack their identity. You make self-sufficiency unfashionable. You make it a mark of poverty, of backwardness, of the old world. You take the woman who bakes her own bread, and you put her next to an image of a modern woman, a free woman, who buys her bread from a store because she has better things to do with her time. You do not say the homemade bread is bad. You say the woman who makes it is behind. And slowly, steadily, over the course of a generation, you shift the culture. You make dependency aspirational. You make helplessness look like progress. This was not subtle. In the 1950s, it became an all-out assault. The post-war economic boom needed consumers, not citizens. It needed people who bought, not people who built. And the toolbox for manufacturing this shift was advertising, which by that point had been weaponized by men who understood the human psyche better than most therapists. Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, had already proven in the 1920s that you could manipulate public behavior on a massive scale by targeting not logic, but emotion, not need, but desire, not what people thought, but what they felt when they looked at themselves in the mirror. Bernays once got an entire generation of women to start smoking cigarettes by rebranding them as torches of freedom during a suffrage parade in 1929. He did not argue that smoking was healthy or wise. He connected it to identity, to liberation, to the feeling of being modern and autonomous. The cigarette was never the product. The feeling was the product. And that same playbook, that same dark art of making people feel incomplete without something they never needed, was applied to every corner of domestic life throughout the 1950s. Think about what happened to food. For thousands of years, humans cooked. Every culture, every civilization, every family had a relationship with the raw ingredients of survival. Then, in a single generation, cooking was repositioned. It was not a skill anymore. It was a chore, a burden, something that a modern kitchen, filled with modern appliances and modern convenience foods, could liberate you from. Betty Crocker cake mix did not sell flour and sugar in a box. It sold the idea that your time was too valuable to waste on mixing flour and sugar yourself. And the women who bought it did not feel like they were losing a skill. They felt like they were gaining freedom. That is the trick. That is the magic. You take something away from people and you make them thank you for it. The same thing happened with repair. There was a time, and it was not that long ago, when every neighborhood had a man or a woman who could fix nearly anything. A radio that stopped working. A lawnmower that would not start. A chair with a broken leg. This was normal. This was community infrastructure, built on shared knowledge and mutual capability. And then, starting in the 1950s and accelerating through the 70s and 80s, products were deliberately designed to be unrepairable. Sealed units, proprietary screws, components glued together instead of bolted. The message was clear, though it was never spoken aloud. You are not supposed to open this. You are not supposed to understand how this works. You are supposed to use it until it breaks and then buy another one. And if you cannot fix it, that is not a flaw in the product. That is a flaw in your expectations. This is the architecture of manufactured fragility, and it has been refined into something so elegant, so seamless, that most people do not even see it. They just feel the effects. Let me walk you through how it works today, because the modern version makes the 1950s look like amateur hour. The mechanism has 3 stages. The first is seduction. The second is dependency. The third is identity capture. And by the time you reach stage 3, you are not a customer anymore. You are a host. And the service is the parasite. Seduction is the easy part. Someone offers to remove a friction point from your life. Grocery delivery, a meal kit, a laundry service, a smart thermostat that learns your preferences, an app that manages your calendar and sends your mother a birthday card so you do not have to remember. Each one of these, in isolation, seems like a reasonable trade. You are exchanging money for time. You are being efficient. You are, as the marketing tells you, optimizing your life. And on day 1, that is true. On day 1, you get the time back and you still have the skill. You could cook if you wanted to. You could do the laundry. You could remember the birthday. You just choose not to. And that choice feels powerful. That choice feels like control. But here is what nobody tells you about skills. They decay. Not dramatically, not overnight. They decay the way a path through the woods disappears when nobody walks it. Slowly, silently, one season at a time. And by month 6 of your meal delivery service, you have not just stopped cooking. You have stopped thinking about cooking. The mental pathway that once connected hunger to action, to opening the fridge, to assessing what you have, to improvising a meal, that pathway has started to fade. And in its place is a new pathway, one that connects hunger to an app, to a menu, to a selection and a delivery time. Your brain has been rewired, not by force, by convenience. This is stage 2, dependency. And it creeps in so quietly that most people mistake it for preference. They say things like, I just prefer to have my meals delivered. I prefer not to deal with laundry. But preference implies choice, and real choice requires capability. If you cannot do the thing you claim to prefer not doing, that is not preference. That is dependency dressed up in the language of freedom. And the companies know this. They are counting on it. Because a customer who prefers your service might leave. A customer who depends on it never will. Then comes stage 3, the one that locks the cage. Identity capture. This is when the dependency becomes part of your story, part of who you are. You stop saying, I use a meal delivery service. You start saying, I am not a cooking person. You stop saying, I have someone clean my apartment. You start saying, I am not a details person. The inability becomes a personality trait. The dependency becomes a lifestyle. And now, any threat to the service feels like a threat to your identity. Suggesting that you should learn to cook is not practical advice anymore. It is an insult. It is telling you to be someone you are not. And that is the final lock. Because people will fight to the death to protect who they believe they are, even if who they believe they are was manufactured by a marketing department in San Francisco. Look around. You can see the evidence of this everywhere. A generation of adults who cannot read a paper map, who cannot change a tire, who cannot sit in a quiet room for 30 minutes without reaching for a screen, who cannot fall asleep without a sound machine, a weighted blanket, a melatonin gummy, and a sleep tracking app that tells them in the morning how well they slept, because apparently they can no longer tell on their own. This is not laziness. I want to be very clear about that. The people caught in this trap are some of the hardest working, highest achieving people in the country. They work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. They are optimizing every minute. They are crushing it, as the culture likes to say. But they are also, in a very real and measurable way, becoming less capable by the month, less resilient, less adaptable, more dependent on a web of services that, if any single thread were to snap, would leave them standing in their own kitchen, not knowing how to boil water. And here is where it gets truly dark. The market has found a way to sell you the solution to the problem it created. Cannot sleep because your nervous system has been wrecked by overstimulation and the absence of natural discomfort? Here is a $200 sleep supplement stack. Cannot cook because you outsourced every meal for 3 years? Here is a cooking class that costs $400 for 6 sessions. Cannot focus because you have not practiced sustained attention in a decade? Here is a meditation app for $12.99 a month. The very capabilities that were stripped from you by the convenience economy are now being sold back to you as premium self-improvement products. You are paying twice, once to lose the skill, and again to relearn it. And the companies on both ends of that transaction are often funded by the same venture capital firms. That is not irony. That is a business model. So what do? How do you step out of a machine that was designed over the course of nearly 100 years to make stepping out feel impossible? The answer is not to throw your phone in the ocean and move to a cabin in Montana. That is a fantasy, not a strategy. The answer is much quieter than that, and much harder. You start by reclaiming one thing, just one. Not because you need to, not because it will save you money, though it might, but because the act of doing something difficult and unnecessary is the only antidote to a life that has been sanded smooth of all resistance. Pick the thing that scares you a little, the thing that makes you think, I do not know how to do that. Because that feeling, that small flash of incompetence, that is not a problem to be solved with a purchase. That is your growth edge. That is the place where your resilience lives, waiting to be rebuilt. Cook a meal from whatever is already in your kitchen. Do not look up a recipe. Just open the fridge and figure it out. It will probably not be good. That is the point. The point is not the meal. The point is the act of facing uncertainty and producing something anyway. Fix something that is broken instead of replacing it. It does not matter if the repair is ugly. It does not matter if it takes you 3 hours to do what a professional could do in 20 minutes. What matters is that you prove to yourself that you can interact with the physical world and shape it with your own hands. Walk somewhere instead of driving. Sit in silence instead of reaching for the podcast. Let yourself be bored. Let yourself be uncomfortable. These are not punishments. These are exercises. You are training the one muscle that the modern economy needs you to never develop, the muscle of enough, the muscle that looks at a problem and says, I can handle this myself. There is a Japanese concept called wabi-sabi. It is the art of finding beauty in imperfection, in the cracked tea bowl, in the uneven garden path, in the meal that did not turn out quite right, but was made with attention and care. It is the direct opposite of the seamless, frictionless, optimized life that you are being sold. And there is something in it, something old and stubborn and true, that the entire convenience economy is terrified of. Because a person who can find beauty in imperfection is a person who does not need the upgrade, does not need the premium tier, does not need the service that promises to make life perfect. And a person who does not need those things is not a customer. They are free. That man in Manhattan, the one who cannot sleep without his $4,000 climate system, he told my friend something that I have not been able to shake. He said, I have everything dialed in perfectly, and I have never been more anxious in my life. Read that again. Everything is perfect, and he is falling apart. Because perfection is not a human state. It is a product state. Humans are built for friction, for struggle, for the small daily victories of solving problems with their own minds and their own hands. Take that away, and you do not get paradise. You get a kind of padded prison where every need is met and nothing feels real. The hidden cost of a seamless life is not money. It is you. It is the capable, adaptable, resilient version of yourself that gets a little smaller every time you outsource something you could have done. Every time you pay to avoid a discomfort. Every time you trade a skill for a subscription. You are not simplifying your life. You are simplifying yourself. And the companies that profit from your shrinking, they are not going to tell you. They are going to send you a push notification telling you that your premium membership has been renewed, and they hope you are enjoying the experience. The question is not whether you can afford the seamless life. You probably can. The question is whether you can afford what it costs you. And by the time most people think to ask that question, the bill has already come due. The skills are gone. The confidence is gone. The quiet knowledge that you can take care of yourself, that ancient, fundamental human birthright has been sold off piece by piece to companies that will rent it back to you for $9.99 a month. So, tonight, do something inefficient. Do something the hard way. Burn the dinner. Get lost without GPS. Sit in the heat without touching the thermostat. And pay attention to what happens inside you. That discomfort you feel, that agitation, that itch to grab your phone and fix it, that is not a flaw. That is a withdrawal symptom. And like all withdrawal, it means the drug is leaving your system. Stay with it. Because on the other side of that discomfort is something the market cannot sell you. Something it has spent 100 years trying to make you forget. On the other side is the memory that you were built for this. All of it. The mess, the struggle, the imperfection. You were built to handle it, and you still can, if you choose to.